The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Benning as Sarah Mitchell stepped out of her quarters, her polished boots clicking against the concrete with military precision. At 28, she had already earned a reputation as one of the toughest drill instructors in the entire training facility. Her piercing blue eyes could reduce a cocky recruit to tears with a single glance, and her voice could cut through chaos like a blade through butter. But today felt different somehow, charged with an electricity she couldn't quite identify. Sarah had joined the Army at 18, straight out of a small town in Montana, where her father had run a struggling ranch, and her mother worked double shifts at the local diner. The military offered structure, purpose, and a way to prove that she was more than just another farm girl with limited options. She excelled in basic training, pushing herself harder than anyone expected, including herself. Her drill sergeants noticed her natural leadership abilities and recommended her for advanced training programs. Over the next decade, Sarah climbed the ranks through sheer determination and an unwavering commitment to excellence. She served 2 tours overseas, where she learned that leadership wasn't just about barking orders, but about inspiring others to find strength they didn't know they possessed. When she returned stateside, the opportunity to become a drill instructor felt like a natural progression. She could shape the next generation of soldiers, instill in them the discipline and mental toughness that had carried her through her darkest moments. The training facility at Fort Benning was massive, sprawling across hundreds of acres, with obstacle courses, firing ranges, and barracks that housed thousands of recruits at any given time. Sarah had been assigned to Alpha Company, known for producing some of the finest soldiers in the Army. Her commanding officer, Colonel Harrison, had handpicked her for the position after reviewing her exemplary service record and observing her natural ability to connect with and motivate others. Her daily routine began at 0500 hours, with a 5-mile run around the base perimeter. Sarah believed that a drill instructor had to be in better physical condition than any recruit under her command. She couldn't expect excellence from others without first demanding it from herself. After her run, she would review training schedules, prepare equipment, and mentally prepare for the day ahead. Each group of recruits presented unique challenges, and Sarah prided herself on adapting her approach to bring out the best in every individual. The recruits in her current cycle were a diverse group from all corners of America. There was Marcus, a former gang member from Detroit who joined the Army to escape a life that seemed destined for prison or death. Jennifer had grown up in an affluent suburb, but felt disconnected from her privileged background and sought purpose through service. Tommy was a third-generation military man whose grandfather had served in Vietnam and whose father had fought in the Gulf War. Each recruit brought their own baggage, fears, and dreams, and Sarah saw it as her responsibility to help them forge those elements into something stronger. Training these young men and women required a delicate balance of toughness and compassion. Sarah had learned early in her career that breaking someone's spirit was easy, but building them back up into a confident, capable soldier required skill and patience. She studied each recruit carefully, identifying their strengths and weaknesses, their triggers and motivations. Some responded to direct confrontation, while others needed encouragement and gentle guidance. The key was knowing which approach to use and when. One recruit who particularly caught her attention was David Chen, a quiet computer programmer from Silicon Valley who seemed completely out of place in the military environment. He struggled with the physical demands of training and often appeared overwhelmed by the aggressive atmosphere. Other drill instructors had written him off as a washout, but Sarah saw potential beneath his uncertainty. During off-duty hours, she would work with him individually, helping him build confidence and physical strength. She knew that the military needed soldiers with diverse skills, and David's analytical mind could prove valuable in modern warfare scenarios. Another challenging case was Rebecca Torres, a former college athlete who possessed incredible physical abilities, but struggled with authority. She had been kicked off her university soccer team for clashing with coaches, and seemed determined to repeat those patterns in the Army. Sarah recognized that Rebecca's defiance stemmed from fear of vulnerability rather than genuine disrespect. Through careful mentoring and by setting clear boundaries while still showing respect for Rebecca's abilities, Sarah gradually helped the young woman channel her competitive spirit in more productive directions. The most difficult aspect of Sarah's job wasn't the physical demands or the long hours, but the emotional weight of responsibility she carried for each recruit's success or failure. When a recruit struggled, She felt personally invested in finding a way to help them overcome their obstacles. When someone succeeded beyond their own expectations, Sarah experienced a deep satisfaction that made all the challenges worthwhile. She had learned to compartmentalize her emotions during training hours, maintaining the stern facade that recruits expected. But in private moments, she often reflected on the profound impact her role had on these young people's lives. Her reputation among fellow drill instructors was that of a perfectionist who never settled for mediocrity. Other instructors respected her methods, even if they sometimes questioned her willingness to invest extra time in struggling recruits. Sarah believed that every person who entered the military deserved a fair chance to succeed, regardless of their background or initial abilities. This philosophy had earned her both admirers and critics, but she remained committed to her approach. The obstacle course at Fort Benning was legendary among military training facilities. It consisted of 12 challenging stations designed to test every aspect of a soldier's physical and mental capabilities. The course included rope climbs, wall scaling, tire runs, monkey bars, and a particularly notorious section known as the confidence course that featured a series of high platforms connected by narrow beams and ropes. Many recruits found this section terrifying, but Sarah viewed it as an opportunity to help them conquer their fears and discover inner strength. Sarah had completed the obstacle course hundreds of times, both as a recruit herself and later as an instructor demonstrating proper techniques. She knew every handhold, every potential hazard, and every shortcut that recruits might be tempted to take. Her personal best time on the course was impressive even by instructor standards, and she often used her own performance as motivation for recruits who claimed certain obstacles were impossible to complete. The rivalry between drill instructors was fierce but generally good-natured, built on mutual respect for each other's dedication and competence. However, there was one instructor who seemed to view Sarah's success as a personal affront. Staff Sergeant Michael Rodriguez had been at Fort Benning for 6 years and had developed a reputation for being exceptionally tough on recruits. His methods were effective but often criticized for being unnecessarily harsh. He particularly resented the fact that a relatively new instructor like Sarah had gained recognition and respect so quickly. Rodriguez often made comments about Sarah's soft approach to training, suggesting that her empathy toward struggling recruits would ultimately make them weaker soldiers. He believed that the military required absolute toughness and that showing any form of compassion was a sign of weakness. These philosophical differences had created tension between them, though Sarah tried to maintain professional courtesy despite his obvious hostility. The conflict came to a head during a training exercise where Rodriguez publicly criticized Sarah's decision to give a struggling recruit additional opportunities to complete an obstacle. He argued that in real combat situations, soldiers didn't get second chances, and that preparing recruits for the harsh realities of military life required similar uncompromising standards during training. Sarah calmly explained her reasoning, noting that the recruit in question had shown significant improvement and that with additional practice would likely become a capable soldier. Rodriguez's response was to challenge Sarah's authority and competence in front of the recruits, creating an awkward situation that required immediate resolution. Colonel Harrison was forced to intervene, privately counseling both instructors about the importance of presenting a united front to recruits while acknowledging their different training philosophies. However, the incident left Sarah feeling frustrated and determined to prove that her methods were not only effective but superior to Rodriguez's harsh approach. This ongoing tension had been building for months, creating an undercurrent of competition that affected the entire training environment. Other instructors found themselves choosing sides, and recruits began to notice the discord between two of their most prominent drill sergeants. Sarah realized that the situation needed to be addressed decisively, but she also knew that any direct confrontation with Rodriguez would need to be handled carefully to avoid further disrupting the training program. As she prepared for another day of training, Sarah reflected on the challenges and rewards of her chosen career. The military had given her purpose, structure, and the opportunity to make a meaningful difference in other people's lives. She had overcome countless obstacles to reach her current position, and had no intention of allowing anyone to undermine her authority or question her commitment to excellence. The day ahead would bring new challenges, as every day did, but Sarah felt prepared to face whatever came her way. Little did she know that this particular day would test her in ways she had never imagined, challenging not only her physical capabilities but her deepest beliefs about strength, determination, and what it truly meant to lead by example. The morning routine proceeded normally, with recruits forming up for their daily physical training session. But the seeds of a confrontation that would change everything had already been planted. The tension between Sarah and Rodriguez reached its breaking point on a humid Thursday morning in late August. The recruits had been progressing well through their training cycle, and Sarah felt proud of their development. Even David Chen, the former programmer who had initially struggled with basic physical requirements, was beginning to show real improvement. Rebecca Torres had learned to channel her competitive nature constructively, becoming an unofficial leader among her fellow recruits. The transformation Sarah witnessed daily reminded her why she had chosen this demanding profession. During the morning briefing, Colonel Harrison announced that visiting officers from the Pentagon would be observing training exercises the following week. These evaluations were crucial for the facility's reputation and could significantly impact funding and resources. All drill instructors were expected to showcase their best work, demonstrating the effectiveness of Fort Benning's training programs. The pressure was immediate and palpable, as everyone understood the stakes involved. Rodriguez saw this announcement as an opportunity to prove his superiority over Sarah's methods. After the briefing, he approached her with a proposal that surprised everyone within earshot. He suggested that they each take their current recruit classes through the complete obstacle course, with times and completion rates recorded for comparison. The losing instructor would publicly acknowledge that their colleagues' methods were superior and would defer to their expertise in future training decisions. Vera immediately recognized this as more than just a friendly competition. Rodriguez was essentially challenging her professional credibility and trying to humiliate her in front of their peers and superiors. The smart play would have been to decline the challenge and maintain professional dignity. However, Sarah also knew that backing down would be interpreted as weakness and could undermine her authority with both recruits and fellow instructors. After a moment's consideration, she accepted the challenge, setting the stage for a confrontation that would have far-reaching consequences. The rules were simple but comprehensive. Each instructor would guide their recruit class through the complete obstacle course, with official timekeepers recording individual completion times and noting any failures to complete specific obstacles. The winning class would be determined by overall completion rate and average time. Both instructors would personally demonstrate each obstacle before their recruits attempted it, showcasing proper technique and inspiring confidence. The exercise would take place the following afternoon, giving both classes time to prepare mentally and physically. Word of the competition spread quickly throughout the base, generating excitement and anxiety in equal measure. Recruits who weren't directly involved found excuses to be nearby during training sessions, hoping to catch glimpses of the preparation. Veteran instructors debated the wisdom of the challenge, with some viewing it as healthy competition while others worried about the potential negative consequences for whichever side lost. Sarah spent the evening reviewing every aspect of the obstacle course with her recruits, identifying specific techniques that could save precious seconds, and discussing strategies for overcoming mental barriers. She emphasized teamwork and mutual support, explaining that everyone's success contributed to the group's overall performance. Her approach focused on building confidence and maintaining positive energy, even when discussing the more challenging obstacles. Rodriguez took a dramatically different approach with his recruits, emphasizing the consequences of failure and the importance of individual performance. His training session resembled a military preparation for actual combat, with aggressive motivation techniques and stark warnings about what would happen to those who failed to meet expectations. While his methods generated intensity and focus, they also created visible anxiety among several recruits who were already struggling with confidence issues. The night before the competition, Sarah found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion from an intensive day of preparation. She walked the obstacle course alone under the moonlight, visualizing each movement and mentally rehearsing the demonstration she would provide for her recruits. The course seemed different in the darkness, more imposing and mysterious than during daylight hours. She had completed these obstacles countless times, but tomorrow felt different because so much was riding on her performance. The most challenging section of the course was a series of high platforms connected by narrow wooden beams and rope bridges, situated 20 feet above the ground. This section required perfect balance, upper body strength, and mental focus. A safety net was positioned below, but falling would result in automatic disqualification from the exercise and potential injury that could sideline someone for weeks or months. Sarah had never fallen from this section, but she also understood that overconfidence could be as dangerous as fear. The rope climb near the end of the course was another potential bottleneck that could significantly impact completion times. The rope was 30 feet long and required both technique and physical strength to ascend efficiently. Sarah had developed a specific climbing method that maximized efficiency while minimizing fatigue, and she had spent considerable time teaching this technique to her recruits. However, she knew that under pressure, even well-trained individuals could forget proper form and waste precious energy through inefficient movement. The morning of the competition arrived with oppressive humidity and temperatures already climbing toward uncomfortable levels by sunrise. Sarah maintained her usual routine, beginning with her 5-mile run and continuing with equipment inspection and mental preparation. Her recruits seemed nervous but determined, gathering around her for final instructions and encouragement. She reminded them that the goal was not just to win the competition, but to demonstrate the principles they had learned throughout their training. Rodriguez's recruits appeared equally focused but carried an air of grim determination that reflected their instructor's intense preparation methods. The contrast between the two groups was immediately apparent to observers, with Sarah's team displaying cautious optimism, while Rodriguez's recruits seemed burdened by the weight of expectations and consequences for failure. Colonel Harrison arrived to observe the competition along with several other senior officers, adding to the pressure both instructors were feeling. The official timekeepers took their positions at various stations throughout the course, equipped with stopwatches and clipboards to record detailed performance data. A small crowd of off-duty personnel had gathered to witness what had become the most talked-about event on the base in months. The competition format required each instructor to demonstrate every obstacle before their recruits attempted it, ensuring that proper technique was clearly displayed and that any safety considerations were addressed. Rodriguez volunteered to go first, confidently approaching the opening obstacle with aggressive energy that matched his training philosophy. His demonstrations were technically proficient but emphasized speed and power over finesse and efficiency. When Sarah's turn came to demonstrate the initial obstacles, she focused on smooth, controlled movements that showcased proper form while still maintaining impressive speed. Her approach emphasized the mental aspects of each challenge as much as the physical requirements, pointing out specific techniques for maintaining balance and conserving energy for the more demanding obstacles ahead. Her recruits watched intently, absorbing every detail of her performance. The competition proceeded smoothly through the first several obstacles, with both recruit groups performing admirably and posting similar completion rates. The tire run, low crawl, and wall scaling sections revealed the different training philosophies at work, but neither approach showed a clear advantage in terms of results. Both Sarah and Rodriguez continued to demonstrate each obstacle, maintaining the energy and focus that their recruits needed to perform at their best. The balance beam section was where the first significant differences began to emerge. Rodriguez's aggressive demonstration emphasized speed over caution, and while he completed the obstacle successfully, his approach created visible anxiety among his recruits. 2 of them fell from the beam during their attempts, requiring them to restart the obstacle and costing valuable time. Sarah's more measured demonstration focused on maintaining steady forward progress while staying relaxed and confident, resulting in a higher completion rate for her team. As they approached the high platform section that Sarah had been visualizing the night before, the pressure intensified significantly. This obstacle had historically been the most challenging part of the course, and both instructors understood that their performance here could determine the outcome of the entire competition. The platforms were connected by narrow beams only 6 inches wide, requiring perfect balance and concentration to navigate successfully. Rodriguez approached the platform section with his characteristic aggressive confidence, moving quickly across the first beam and onto the second platform. However, his emphasis on speed over careful balance caused problems when he reached the most difficult transition between the third and fourth platforms. The beam at this point was slightly curved and required a subtle shift in foot positioning that he executed too hastily. The fall happened almost in slow motion from Sarah's perspective. Rodriguez's foot slipped on the curved beam, and his attempt to recover his balance only made the situation worse. He tumbled backward off the beam, arms windmilling desperately, as he fell toward the safety net below. The net caught him safely, but the impact was hard enough to wind him temporarily and bruise his ego significantly. Sarah knew that this was her moment to demonstrate the superiority of her more cautious approach. She mounted the first platform with calm confidence, focusing on smooth, controlled movements across each beam. Her technique emphasized maintaining 3 points of contact whenever possible, using handholds and careful foot placement to ensure stability. The watching recruits could see the difference between reckless speed and efficient progression. However, fate had other plans for Sarah's demonstration. As she reached the same curved beam where Rodriguez had fallen, she noticed that the surface was slightly damp from morning dew that hadn't yet evaporated in the humid air. She adjusted her foot placement to compensate for the slippery condition, but as she shifted her weight to move forward, her supporting arm slipped on an equally damp handrail. The fall was swift and unexpected. Sarah felt herself losing balance and instinctively reached out to grab anything that might arrest her fall. Her right arm caught on a protruding bolt from the platform structure, and the awkward angle combined with her body weight and momentum created a sickening crack that echoed across the training area. She hit the safety net moments later, her arm twisted at an unnatural angle and pain shooting through her entire body. The silence that followed was deafening. Recruits from both groups stood frozen, unsure of how to react to seeing their seemingly invincible instructor lying injured in the safety net. Rodriguez, still recovering from his own fall and embarrassment, looked on with a mixture of concern and something that might have been satisfaction at Sarah's misfortune. The medical team that was always present during obstacle course exercises rushed to assess her condition. The initial examination revealed what everyone feared. Sarah's right arm was clearly broken, with a compound fracture that would require immediate medical attention and likely months of recovery time. The paramedics carefully extracted her from the safety net and began preparing her for transport to the base medical facility. As they worked, Sarah's mind raced with thoughts about her career, her recruits, and the competition that had taken such an unexpected turn. Rodriguez attempted to approach Sarah as she was being prepared for transport, perhaps to offer assistance or express concern for her injury. However, Sarah's response was immediate and definitive. Despite the obvious pain she was experiencing, her voice was clear and determined when she addressed him directly. She made it crystal clear that the competition was far from over, and that her injury would not prevent her from completing what they had started. The medical team strongly advised against any further physical activity, explaining that her injury required immediate surgery and that any additional trauma could cause permanent damage to her arm. Sarah listened to their concerns but remained adamant that she would not forfeit the competition or allow Rodriguez to claim victory by default. Her determination in the face of such obvious adversity surprised everyone present, including the medical personnel who were accustomed to dealing with injured soldiers. Colonel Harrison found himself in an unprecedented situation, with one of his drill instructors seriously injured but refusing medical evacuation until she could complete a competition that had already gone far beyond reasonable limits. The visiting Pentagon officials were due to arrive in just a few days, and the situation had evolved into something that could potentially reflect poorly on the entire facility if not handled properly. As Sarah was finally convinced to allow medical treatment for her injury, she made a declaration that stunned everyone within earshot. She announced that she would return to complete the obstacle course and finish the competition regardless of her injury or medical recommendations. The combination of pain medication and sheer determination in her voice made it clear that she was absolutely serious about this seemingly impossible commitment. The day that had started as a simple competition between training methods had transformed into something much larger and more significant. Sarah's fall and injury had raised the stakes beyond professional rivalry to a test of will, determination, and the true meaning of leadership under adversity. As she was transported to the medical facility, her recruits and colleagues could only wonder whether she would actually be able to follow through on her incredible promise. The base medical facility at Fort Benning had seen its share of training injuries over the years, but the arrival of Sarah Mitchell presented a unique challenge for the medical staff. Dr. Patricia Williams, the chief orthopedic surgeon, had been practicing military medicine for over 15 years and had developed a reputation for both technical skill and no-nonsense communication with injured soldiers. When she examined Sarah's X-rays, her expression revealed the severity of the fracture before she spoke a single word. The injury was complex, involving both the radius and ulna bones in Sarah's right forearm. The break was displaced and would require surgical intervention with metal plates and screws to ensure proper healing. Dr. Williams explained that even with successful surgery, Sarah would face months of rehabilitation before regaining full function of her arm. The idea of returning to active duty within days, as Sarah insisted she would do, was medically impossible and potentially dangerous. Sarah listened to the medical assessment with growing frustration, not because she disagreed with the diagnosis, but because it threatened to derail everything she had worked toward: her reputation, her authority with recruits, and her professional relationship with fellow instructors all hung in the balance. More importantly, she had made a public commitment to complete the obstacle course competition, and backing down now would validate Rodriguez's claims about her methods being inferior. The surgery took place that evening under general anesthesia, with Dr. Williams and her team working meticulously to align the broken bones and secure them with titanium hardware. The procedure was successful from a technical standpoint, but the post-operative reality was sobering. Sarah's right arm was immobilized in a cast that extended from her knuckles to just below her elbow, and the pain medication made it difficult for her to think clearly about anything beyond basic comfort. During her first night in the medical ward, Sarah found herself surrounded by other injured soldiers, recovering from various training accidents and overseas injuries. The ward had an atmosphere of shared resilience, with patients supporting each other through difficult recovery processes. However, Sarah felt isolated by her unique situation and the promise she had made that seemed increasingly impossible to fulfill. Word of Sarah's injury and her vow to continue the competition had spread throughout the base like wildfire. Opinions were sharply divided between those who admired her determination and those who viewed her commitment as reckless endangerment. Some senior officers worried about the precedent it might set for other soldiers to ignore medical advice and risk further injury. Others saw it as an inspiring example of military dedication that embodied the Army's core values. Rodriguez visited the medical facility the next morning, bringing flowers and what appeared to be genuine concern for Sarah's welfare. However, his presence also carried an implicit message about the competition's resolution. He suggested that given the circumstances, they should consider the challenge concluded and focus on more important matters like preparing for the Pentagon evaluation. His tone was diplomatic, but Sarah detected a hint of satisfaction beneath his expressed sympathy. Sarah's response was immediate and unequivocal. She informed Rodriguez that the competition would continue as planned and that her injury would not prevent her from completing the obstacle course. When he pointed out the obvious physical impossibility of navigating the course with a broken arm, she calmly explained that she would adapt her technique to accommodate the limitation. The conversation ended with Rodriguez shaking his head in disbelief and Sarah more determined than ever to prove her point. The next several days were filled with visits from colleagues, recruits, and superiors, all offering support, but also expressing concerns about her plan to continue the competition. Colonel Harrison spent considerable time discussing the situation with Sarah, trying to understand her motivation and assess the potential risks involved. He respected her determination but worried about the broader implications of allowing an injured instructor to attempt such a dangerous activity. Sarah's recruits were particularly affected by her injury and her insistence on continuing the competition. David Chen, the former programmer who had benefited so much from her patient mentoring, organized a group visit that revealed how deeply her teaching had impacted them. They had learned from her example that true strength came not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them with determination and intelligence. Her injury, rather than diminishing their respect, had actually increased their admiration for her commitment. During her second day in the medical ward, Sarah began developing a mental strategy for completing the obstacle course with only one functional arm. She visualized each section, identifying which obstacles could be modified through technique changes, and which would require completely different approaches. The rope climb section would be particularly challenging, but she remembered techniques she had learned during specialized training that might work with proper adaptation. Dr. Williams was adamant that attempting the obstacle course in Sarah's condition would be medically irresponsible and potentially catastrophic. She explained that the metal hardware in Sarah's arm was designed to support normal daily activities, not the extreme stress of military obstacle training. A fall or excessive strain could cause the surgical repair to fail, potentially resulting in permanent disability or requiring additional surgeries. Sarah appreciated the doctor's concerns but remained convinced that with proper precautions and technique modifications, she could safely complete the course. She proposed a compromise that would allow medical supervision during the attempt and immediate intervention if any complications arose. Dr. Williams was skeptical but agreed to consider the possibility if Sarah could demonstrate basic mobility and pain management without compromising her healing process. The physical therapy sessions began earlier than typical for this type of injury, focusing on maintaining flexibility and strength in Sarah's uninjured arm and core muscles. The physical therapist, Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, had worked with numerous injured soldiers and understood the psychological importance of maintaining some level of physical activity during recovery. However, she had never encountered a patient with such an ambitious and seemingly unrealistic goal. Sarah approached physical therapy with the same intensity she brought to every other aspect of her military career. She pushed herself to the limits of what was medically advisable, constantly testing her balance and coordination with one arm immobilized. Santos noticed that Sarah's mental focus and determination were actually accelerating certain aspects of her recovery, even as her goal remained medically questionable. The base was buzzing with speculation about whether Sarah would actually attempt to complete the obstacle course and what the outcome might be. Betting pools emerged among enlisted personnel, with odds shifting daily based on reports from the medical facility and Sarah's progress in physical therapy. The situation had evolved beyond a simple competition between drill instructors to become a symbol of determination and military spirit that captured the imagination of the entire base. Rodriguez found himself in an increasingly uncomfortable position as support for Sarah grew throughout the base community. His initial satisfaction at her injury had been replaced by concern that her potential success would make him look weak or unsportsmanlike. He began visiting the medical facility regularly, ostensibly to check on Sarah's progress, but actually to gauge the likelihood that she would follow through on her promise. Colonel Harrison was facing pressure from multiple directions regarding the situation. Base medical personnel strongly advised against allowing the competition to continue, citing liability concerns and patient safety. However, other officers argued that preventing Sarah from attempting the course would damage morale and send the wrong message about military values. The visiting Pentagon officials were due to arrive in just days, adding another layer of complexity to an already difficult decision. Sarah's daily routine in the medical facility became a carefully structured program of healing, preparation, and mental conditioning. She studied video footage of previous obstacle course completions, analyzing techniques that might work with her physical limitations. She practiced balance exercises and developed strategies for maintaining momentum through sections that would typically require two-handed coordination. The most challenging aspect of her preparation was dealing with the constant pain and discomfort from her injury, while maintaining the mental focus necessary for such a demanding physical challenge. The pain medication helped but also dulled her reflexes and concentration, creating a difficult balance between comfort and performance capability. She worked with medical staff to develop a pain management strategy that would allow maximum function during the attempt. Her relationship with fellow drill instructors evolved during this period, with many colleagues expressing private admiration for her determination while publicly maintaining concerns about the wisdom of her decision. Some veteran instructors shared stories of their own moments when determination had carried them through seemingly impossible challenges, offering both inspiration and practical advice for her preparation. The recruits under Sarah's instruction had been temporarily reassigned to other instructors while she recovered, but they maintained regular contact and continued to view her as their primary mentor. Their progress under temporary supervision was closely monitored, with many observers noting that Sarah's influence continued to shape their development even in her absence. This continuity demonstrated the lasting impact of her teaching methods and provided additional motivation for her recovery efforts. As the day of the Pentagon evaluation approached, pressure mounted for a final decision about the obstacle course competition. Medical clearance remained highly unlikely, but Sarah's progress in physical therapy and her unwavering determination had impressed even her skeptics. The situation had become a test case for military leadership, medical judgment, and the balance between individual determination and institutional responsibility. Sarah spent her final night in the medical ward visualizing every aspect of the obstacle course completion she planned to attempt. She had developed detailed strategies for each section identified specific techniques for single-handed navigation, and prepared mentally for the intense physical and psychological challenge ahead. Whether she would receive official permission to make the attempt remained uncertain, but her preparation was as thorough and professional as any mission she had ever undertaken. The transformation that had occurred during her recovery period was remarkable not just in physical terms, but in how her injury had paradoxically strengthened her resolve and clarified her purpose. The accident that could have ended her career had instead become an opportunity to demonstrate the principles she had always taught her recruits about overcoming adversity through determination and intelligent preparation. The next phase of her journey would test whether those principles could carry her through the ultimate challenge of proving herself under impossible circumstances. The morning of the Pentagon evaluation arrived with unseasonable coolness that provided a welcome relief from the oppressive heat that had dominated the previous weeks. Sarah woke before dawn in the medical facility, her broken arm throbbing despite the pain medication, but her mind clearer and more focused than it had been since the accident. Today would determine not only the outcome of her competition with Rodriguez, but also the trajectory of her entire military career. Dr. Williams arrived early to conduct a final medical assessment, her expression revealing the internal conflict between professional medical judgment and respect for Sarah's unwavering determination. The examination showed that Sarah's surgical site was healing properly, and that there were no signs of infection or complications. However, the doctor remained deeply concerned about the stress that obstacle course completion would place on the healing bones and surgical hardware. After careful consideration and consultation with her medical colleagues, Dr. Williams made a decision that surprised everyone involved. She would provide conditional medical clearance for Sarah's attempt, but with strict limitations and constant medical supervision. A full medical team would be positioned at every obstacle, with authority to immediately halt the exercise if any signs of medical distress or injury complication became apparent. The conditions were comprehensive and non-negotiable. Sarah would wear additional protective padding around her cast and injured arm. She would be required to demonstrate successful completion of modified practice versions of each obstacle before attempting the full course. Most importantly, she would have to acknowledge in writing that she understood the medical risks and accepted full responsibility for any consequences resulting from her decision. Colonel Harrison convened an emergency meeting with his senior staff to address the unprecedented situation. The Pentagon evaluation team was scheduled to observe training exercises throughout the day, and news of Sarah's planned obstacle course attempt had reached their advanced personnel. Some officials viewed it as an inspiring demonstration of military values, while others worried about liability and the message it might send about following medical advice. The compromise reached was complex but workable. Sarah's obstacle course attempt would be scheduled as a special demonstration of adaptive training techniques, showcasing how military personnel could overcome physical limitations through determination and modified methodology. This framing transformed her personal challenge into an official training demonstration that could potentially impress the visiting Pentagon officials while providing cover for the unusual circumstances. Rodriguez spent the morning grappling with conflicting emotions about the day's events. His initial satisfaction at Sarah's injury had long since been replaced by grudging respect for her determination and growing anxiety about what her success might mean for his own reputation. He found himself in the unusual position of hoping for her failure, while simultaneously admiring her courage in attempting such an impossible challenge. Sarah's preparation routine began with an extended session with the physical therapy team, focusing on final adjustments to the adaptive techniques she had developed for single-handed obstacle navigation. Each movement was practiced repeatedly until it became automatic, reducing the cognitive load she would face during the actual attempt when adrenaline and pressure might compromise her decision-making abilities. The most technically challenging adaptation involved the rope climb section, which traditionally required coordinated use of both arms and legs. Sarah had developed a technique that relied primarily on leg strength and core stability, using her functional left arm for balance and guidance rather than primary lifting force. The method was slower than traditional climbing, but theoretically achievable, with sufficient practice and determination. The balance beam section required a completely different approach, with Sarah learning to maintain equilibrium through subtle weight shifts and careful foot placement, rather than the arm movements that typically provided stability corrections. During practice sessions, she had initially struggled with this adaptation, but gradually developed an intuitive sense for the modified technique that gave her confidence for the actual attempt. The high platform section where both she and Rodriguez had previously fallen would be the ultimate test of her adaptive methodology. The narrow beams and significant height created obvious dangers for someone with limited ability to arrest a fall or maintain balance through arm positioning. Sarah had studied the section extensively and identified specific handholds and foot placement strategies that might work with her limitation. As word spread throughout the base that Sarah's attempt had received official approval, the atmosphere became electric with anticipation and nervous energy. Off-duty personnel found reasons to be near the obstacle course area, creating an audience that included everyone from senior officers to kitchen staff. The unprecedented nature of the situation had captured the imagination of the entire base community. The Pentagon evaluation team arrived mid-morning, consisting of 3 colonels and a brigadier general, who had been briefed on the unusual demonstration they would observe. Their initial reactions were mixed, with some expressing concern about the propriety of allowing an injured soldier to attempt such a dangerous challenge, while others were intrigued by the potential insights into adaptive training methods and military resilience. Sarah's final medical check revealed elevated heart rate and blood pressure, which Dr. Williams attributed to normal pre-performance anxiety rather than medical complications. The doctor remained on standby with full emergency equipment and a clear mandate to stop the exercise immediately if any concerning symptoms developed. The level of medical preparation was extensive, reflecting both the seriousness of the situation and the commitment to ensuring Sarah's safety. Rodriguez approached Sarah before her attempt, offering what appeared to be genuine encouragement mixed with obvious anxiety about the day's outcome. Their conversation was brief but significant, acknowledging the rivalry that had brought them to this point while recognizing that the situation had evolved beyond simple competition into something that would affect both of their careers regardless of the immediate outcome. The obstacle course had been modified slightly to accommodate the medical team's safety requirements, with additional safety equipment positioned at critical points and rescue personnel stationed throughout the route. However, the essential challenges remained unchanged, ensuring that any successful completion would represent genuine achievement rather than a diminished version of the standard test. Sarah's warm-up routine was careful and methodical, focusing on activation of her functional muscles, while protecting her injured arm from unnecessary stress. The physical therapy team supervised every movement, making final adjustments to her protective equipment and reviewing the specific technique she would employ at each obstacle. The preparation was as thorough as for any major military operation. The crowd that gathered to witness Sarah's attempt included not only base personnel, but also her recruits, who had been granted special permission to observe their instructor's remarkable effort. Their presence provided additional motivation for Sarah, as she recognized that her performance would either validate or undermine everything she had taught them about overcoming adversity through determination and intelligent preparation. Colonel Harrison provided a brief introduction to the demonstration for the Pentagon evaluation team, explaining the circumstances that had led to this unique situation, and emphasizing the training value of observing adaptive techniques under realistic conditions. His presentation carefully balanced respect for Sarah's determination with acknowledgement of the unusual nature of the attempt. As Sarah approached the starting line of the obstacle course, the collective tension of hundreds of observers was palpable. Her expression was calm and focused, reflecting the mental preparation she had undergone and her confidence in the adaptive techniques she had developed. The protective cast on her right arm was clearly visible, serving as a stark reminder of the extraordinary nature of what she was attempting to accomplish. The first obstacle was a tire run that required rapid foot movement through a series of suspended tires while maintaining forward momentum. Sarah had practiced this extensively with one arm secured, developing a rhythm that relied on precise footwork and core balance rather than arm movement for stability. Her execution was smooth and efficient, demonstrating that her adaptive techniques could work under pressure. The low crawl section presented unique challenges for someone unable to use one arm for support and propulsion. Sarah had developed a technique that emphasized leg drive and efficient body positioning, using her functional arm primarily for steering and obstacle avoidance. Her progress was slower than normal, but steady and controlled, proving that determination could overcome significant physical limitations. The wall-scaling obstacle typically required coordinated use of both arms to pull oneself over an 8-foot barrier. Sarah's adapted technique relied on leg strength and momentum, using her functional arm for guidance and her injured arms cast as a crude hook for stability. The execution was awkward but effective, demonstrating remarkable innovation under pressure and generating appreciative murmurs from the watching crowd. Each successful obstacle completion built Sarah's confidence and validated her preparation efforts. The medical team monitored her closely, checking for signs of fatigue or injury complication, but her performance remained strong and controlled. The Pentagon officials were taking detailed notes, clearly impressed by both her determination and the practical applications of her adaptive techniques. As Sarah approached the balance beam section where her modified technique would face its greatest test, the crowd fell silent with anticipation. This obstacle had been a source of particular concern during her preparation, as the narrow beam provided minimal margin for error, and her injured arm severely limited her options for recovery if she began to lose balance. Her approach to the beam was cautious but confident, reflecting hours of practice and mental preparation. Each step was deliberate and controlled, with subtle weight shifts maintaining equilibrium, without the arm movements that would normally provide stability corrections. The technique was visually different from standard approaches, but proved effective as she navigated the full length of the obstacle without incident. The rope climb section represented perhaps the greatest technical challenge of Sarah's entire attempt. The 30-foot rope required significant upper body strength and coordination that she would have to accomplish primarily with her legs and core muscles. Her adapted technique looked unconventional, but proved surprisingly efficient as she made steady progress up the rope, generating amazed reactions from observers who had doubted this obstacle was possible with her limitations. As Sarah successfully completed the rope climb and moved toward the final challenges of the obstacle course, it became clear that her remarkable attempt was succeeding beyond anyone's expectations. The combination of thorough preparation, adaptive innovation, and sheer determination was proving that physical limitations could be overcome through intelligence and unwavering commitment to excellence. The high platform section still lay ahead, representing the final test of her incredible journey and the ultimate validation of everything she had worked toward since her injury. The narrow beams and significant height would challenge not only her adapted techniques, but her courage and mental resilience under the most demanding circumstances imaginable. The high platform section loomed before Sarah like a final examination of everything she had learned about overcoming adversity through determination and innovation. 20 feet above the ground, connected by narrow beams that had claimed both her and Rodriguez in their previous attempt, the obstacle represented not just a physical challenge but a symbolic confrontation with the circumstances that had brought her to this extraordinary moment. It depended on my decisions to Sasea Faust around my death. The watching crowd fell completely silent, understanding that there was witnessing something unprecedented in military training. The distances of the book spent a necessary on my death so. Even the Pentagon officials had stopped taking notes, completely absorbed in the drama unfolding before them. The medical team maintained their positions at strategic points around the high platform section, ready to respond immediately if anything went wrong. Dr. Williams stood directly below the most challenging transition point, her expression reflecting both professional concern and genuine admiration for Sarah's remarkable journey to this moment. The safety equipment was in place, but everyone understood that a fall could still result in serious complications to Sarah's healing arm. Rodriguez watched from the sideline, his own complex emotions clearly visible as he observed Sarah attempting to accomplish what he had failed to achieve even with full physical capability. The competition that had begun as a simple rivalry over training methods had evolved into something far more profound, testing fundamental beliefs about strength, determination, and what it meant to lead by example under impossible circumstances. Sarah began her ascent to the first platform with smooth, controlled movements that demonstrated the countless hours of preparation she had invested in this moment. Her left arm provided primary support, while her casted right arm served as a stabilizing guide, an adaptation that looked unconventional but proved remarkably effective. Each movement was deliberate and efficient, wasting no energy on unnecessary motion or hesitation. The transition to the first, narrow beam required Sarah to shift her entire approach to balance and movement. Traditional technique relied heavily on arm movements to maintain equilibrium and correct for minor balance errors. Sarah's adapted method emphasized lower body control and subtle weight distribution changes, creating a movement pattern that appeared almost dance-like in its precision and grace. Her progress across the first beam was steady and controlled, each step carefully placed and every weight shift calculated to maintain forward momentum without compromising stability. The beam was only 6 inches wide, providing minimal margin for error, but Sarah's preparation and mental focus enabled her to navigate it successfully. The watching crowd began to realize that they might actually witness something truly extraordinary. The second platform provided a brief respite where Sarah could reassess her condition and prepare for the increasingly challenging transitions ahead. Her breathing remained controlled despite the obvious physical and mental stress of the situation. The medical monitors showed elevated but stable vital signs, indicating that she was managing the challenge without approaching dangerous levels of exertion or stress. The transition to the second beam required Sarah to navigate a slight upward angle that made balance even more critical. This section had been one of her greatest concerns during preparation, as the slope changed the dynamics of movement and made her adapted technique more difficult to execute effectively. However, her careful practice and mental rehearsal proved their value as she successfully managed the transition and began crossing the angled beam. Halfway across the second beam, Sarah encountered the first significant challenge to her adapted technique. A slight breeze had developed, creating air movement that affected balance in ways that ground-level practice had not fully prepared her for. Traditional response would involve arm movements to counteract the wind's effect, but Sarah was forced to rely entirely on subtle body positioning and mental focus to maintain stability. For a moment that seemed to last an eternity, Sarah wavered on the narrow beam as wind and fatigue combined to challenge her equilibrium. The watching crowd held their collective breath, understanding that they might be witnessing the end of her remarkable attempt. However, Sarah's mental preparation and sheer determination enabled her to regain stability and continue forward, demonstrating the power of psychological resilience under extreme pressure. The third platform brought Sarah to the most challenging section of the entire obstacle course, the curved beam where both she and Rodriguez had previously fallen. This beam required a subtle change in foot positioning and weight distribution that was difficult to execute even under normal circumstances. With only one functional arm and the accumulated fatigue of her extended effort, the challenge seemed almost insurmountable. Sarah's approach to the curved beam reflected every lesson she had learned about adaptive technique and mental focus during her recovery and preparation. She moved even more slowly and deliberately than before, testing each foot placement and weight shift before committing to forward movement. Her technique looked entirely different from standard approaches, but proved remarkably effective for her unique circumstances. The curve in the beam created a visual illusion that made balance more challenging, requiring Sarah to trust her physical sensations rather than visual cues that might mislead her about her position and stability. This aspect of the challenge had been particularly difficult to prepare for during practice sessions, as the psychological effect of height and visual distortion could only be fully experienced during the actual attempt. As Sarah successfully navigated the curved beam and reached the fourth platform, the realization began to spread through the watching crowd that they were witnessing something truly historic. No one had ever completed the fort bending obstacle course with such severe physical limitations, and her success was validating everything she had taught about overcoming adversity through determination and intelligent adaptation. The final beam was the longest and most exposed section of the high platform obstacle, requiring sustained balance and concentration over a distance that would test even uninjured individuals. Sarah's energy reserves were clearly diminishing, but her mental focus remained sharp, and her technique continued to prove effective. Each step brought her closer to a victory that would vindicate not only her personal determination, but her entire approach to military training and leadership. Rodriguez found himself experiencing unexpected emotions as he watched Sarah approach completion of a challenge that had defeated him even with full physical capability. His initial resentment had been replaced by growing respect for her remarkable achievement, though he also understood that her success would fundamentally alter the dynamics of their professional relationship and his own standing among fellow instructors. The Pentagon officials were clearly impressed by what they were observing, recognizing both the immediate achievement and the broader implications for military training and adaptive techniques. Their presence added significance to Sarah's attempt beyond the personal competition, transforming it into a demonstration of military values and innovative problem-solving under extreme circumstances. As Sarah reached the final platform and prepared to descend safely to ground level, the crowd's tension began to transform into anticipation of celebration. Her remarkable journey was nearing successful completion, proving that physical limitations could be overcome through determination, preparation, and innovative adaptation of standard techniques. The descent required careful attention to avoid injury after such an extended effort, but presented no technical challenges comparable to what she had already accomplished. Sarah's feet touched the ground to thunderous applause from the assembled crowd, who had witnessed something unprecedented in military training history. Her successful completion of the obstacle course with a broken arm represented more than personal achievement. It validated her training philosophy and demonstrated the power of mental resilience in overcoming seemingly impossible challenges. Dr. Williams was the first to reach Sarah after her successful completion, conducting an immediate medical assessment to ensure that the extended effort had not caused complications to her healing injury. The examination revealed no new injuries or concerning symptoms, though Sarah was clearly exhausted from the extraordinary physical and mental demands of her achievement. Colonel Harrison's response to Sarah's success was immediate and decisive. In front of the Pentagon officials and the entire assembled crowd, he announced that Sarah's remarkable achievement warranted special recognition, and that her innovative adaptive techniques should be studied and potentially incorporated into official training programs. Her determination and success under impossible circumstances exemplified the finest traditions of military service. Rodriguez approached Sarah as the immediate excitement began to settle, offering congratulations that appeared genuine despite the obvious implications for his own professional standing. The competition that had started as a rivalry over training methods had been definitively resolved, with Sarah's success proving that her approach to leadership and instruction was not only effective, but capable of inspiring extraordinary achievement under the most challenging circumstances. The Pentagon officials requested a detailed briefing on Sarah's adaptive techniques and the training methodology that had prepared her for such a remarkable achievement. Their interest extended beyond the immediate demonstration to the broader applications for military training and the development of adaptive techniques for soldiers facing various physical limitations or challenging circumstances. Sarah's recruits were among the most enthusiastic celebrants of her achievement, understanding better than anyone the significance of what they had witnessed. Their instructor had not only overcome a serious injury, but had done so in a way that validated everything she had taught them about facing adversity with determination and intelligence. The lesson would stay with them throughout their military careers and beyond. The competition badge that Rodriguez had worn so proudly was ceremoniously transferred to Sarah in recognition of her unprecedented achievement. The symbolic gesture represented more than just the resolution of their personal rivalry. It acknowledged the superiority of her training philosophy and her remarkable demonstration of leadership under impossible circumstances. As the day concluded and the crowds dispersed, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her from a serious injury to this moment of triumph. The accident that could have ended her career had instead provided an opportunity to demonstrate the principles she had always taught, proving that true strength came not from physical capability alone, but from the determination to overcome any obstacle through preparation, innovation, and unwavering commitment to excellence. The Pentagon evaluation that had provided the backdrop for her achievement resulted in outstanding marks for Fort Benning, with specific recognition for the innovative training approaches and leadership development exemplified by Sarah's remarkable demonstration. Her success had not only vindicated her personal approach, but had also enhanced the reputation of the entire facility. Sarah's recovery continued under careful medical supervision, but her successful completion of the obstacle course had proven that proper adaptation and determination could overcome significant physical limitations. The techniques she had developed during her preparation were documented and studied, potentially benefiting future soldiers who might face similar challenges. The story of Sarah Mitchell's one-handed conquest of the Fort Benning obstacle course became legendary within military training circles, inspiring countless soldiers to push beyond their perceived limitations and demonstrating that true leadership meant setting an example of determination and excellence regardless of circumstances. Her achievement proved that the strongest individuals were not those who never fell, but those who found ways to succeed even when every advantage had been stripped away.